Good evening, everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Key, and I am very fortunate to be the current head of school and foundation at Lakefield College School. You are joining us for our speaker series, which we have been running monthly this year. And we've just been so fortunate to have some great speakers with us. We do record these sessions, and so we would ask you, if you want to catch up on any of the other ones that you've missed, to please do that. We do have the opportunity to have questions, and so at any time, I encourage you to put questions into the box at the bottom of the screen, and we will have a moderator this evening, and there'll be plenty of time to have a great discussion. So thank you for joining us. I want to begin by just reminding everybody that we completed a strategic plan a couple of years ago, and we are just more convinced that the mission and vision and values of Lakefield College School are really resonating. And this is important for tonight's conversation because as we go through this transformation of our campus, we are really committed to changing the physical space without changing really the heart and soul of who we are as a school. I will say that we are updating our values. So stay tuned. We are going through a process of getting feedback just to make sure that the language is really resonating with modern priorities. So here we are, the 4 directions of the school, but at the heart of them is the fact that we are serious about working with teenagers to make them leaders, and we believe that's best done by crafting transformative experiences for them. Everybody's wondering what it's like to be on campus. So without a doubt, all of the safety first protocols continue to be a challenge. Things change regularly. But the good news is that we remain a healthy and relatively happy campus community. We did make a commitment this year to continue with the house model. And when I say that the house model is keeping our community safe, that's really from a health and well-being standpoint. And that's a huge priority for us always at the school, but particularly at a time when we know that children and teenagers have spent more time than they should in front of their devices and indoors. So we keep joking that Lakefield is way ahead of things in that we've always been an outdoor school, and now more than ever, our students are spending a lot of time outdoors. Maybe not today when it was minus 24 on my walk this morning. They're still running across campus with sweatshirts on, no jackets, hats, or mitts. So some things, as I said, probably haven't changed. But the last thing I'll say about life on campus is that our co-ed students came to me last week and they said they really want to talk about how will we ensure that a school like Lakefield, that's so much about feeling and community and relationships, how are we going to continue to keep that culture going when we've just had this year where the feeling and community and relationships are just not the same? And so we're calling it the Culture Project, and we're working with the student leaders, the grade 12s in particular, to help them tell that story. And it's developing a little bit so that it's beyond just the grade 11s, and now they want to make sure that our future students also know the special things about Lakefield, when for the last 2 years we haven't necessarily experienced it in quite the same way. And finally, as a reminder, we are gearing up for our 150th anniversary in 2029. And by then, we have made a really aggressive commitment to upgrading and building some world-class facilities. So specifically right now, we're working on a new dining hall where our whole community can gather, renovating our beloved Windersmith dining hall and chapel, updating all of the houses, hopefully one day also doing an outdoor education building, talking about our school block and classrooms in particular. I'm jumping ahead of myself. And we've made a really special commitment to studying Northcott this year. and really excited about the momentum there. If you haven't noticed, we have posted for a position of an assistant head sustainability, and we've got a team that will be working on a half-an-acre farm starting this spring. So looking towards the future, we knew that we needed a leader in architecture, and somebody who could really bring our community together and help us to plan for and really dream about the future. And we found that person in Christine Lintott. And I know that you're going to really love hearing from her tonight. And without a further introduction, I am honored to turn that over now to Christine Lintott.
Great. Let me jump in, Anne-Marie, and why don't I give a bit of a bio on Christine? And to your point, I had the privilege of meeting Christine. I'm James Hicks, and I had the privilege of meeting her. I guess Christine, it was almost 2 years ago we met. And the first time I met Christine, it was on a beautiful sunny day in British Columbia on a field where Christine was talking about regenerative principles and some of the work she'd done and how she viewed the world. And it was really powerful. And since that time, during my role in the campus property committee, we did work on the master campus plan with the team, and I got a chance to see Christine at work. And two things that really stuck out for me were, Christine, your ability to really understand people and Lakefield itself and get a community from the staff and the students to the alumni to the parents and the whole community together, so you really understood what Lakefield was about. And then the idea of regenerative principles and the idea of how to make buildings and properties and communities regenerative, which of course is what the very core of what Lakefield is. So for everyone's benefit, Christine, let me give you a bio on her. Christine is the principal of her own architectural practice. She's based on Vancouver Island. She's a registered professional architect in the provinces of both British Columbia and Ontario. She's a fellow of the Royal Architectural Institute of Canada and a certified biomimicry professional. Christine's built environment design expertise spans sustainability protocols like LEED, certified projects at the University of Victoria, as well as the LBC Living Building Challenge certification with the organization Power to Be. She's a leader in the development of ecological performance standards and has consistently advocated for the most progressive ecological design strategies in a variety of project typologies, from independent seniors, or from independent schools like ours, to senior housing residences, to single family homes. And the focus of Christine's practice, in collaboration with international expert Jason McLennan and his leading regenerative design practice, McLennan Design, has broadened Christine's influence globally and evolved her ecological strategies towards deep, green, or regenerative solutions for the built environment. And that's something we're very, very thankful for in her work with us at Lakefield. So Christine, thank you so much for speaking with us today. Over to you.
Thank you, James. I'll just get us set up here. We're good to go, Emily. Excellent. All right. In 2020, a year which illustrated change so vividly, the newly adopted Campus Master Plan is an invitation, really, to demonstrate the profound leadership possible from an educational institution. Lakefield College School is uniquely positioned to embody extraordinary global leadership in how it implements its capital projects, in how it restores and elevates the health of the natural systems and the human infrastructure of its campus, and in how the school graduates leaders who have, through their tenure at the school, been transformed by their immersive exposure to the outdoors, engaged in authentic learning, and supported by community relationships that begin really with each other and extend to their relationships beyond the school. This is a vision of generosity, one that seeks to elevate the learning experience, where all members of the community emerge accountable to the well-being of the planet and future generations, both at the school and in their lives beyond Lakefield. It's an assertion of the strength and permanence that underpins the vision, direction, and focus of the school. The vision, mission, values, goals, and desired outcomes outlined in the school's strategic plan are designed to cultivate a culture of leadership in a variety of forms. Ultimately, to provide a transformative learning experience that inspires teenagers to be leaders who care, connect, and contribute. Transformative leadership has implications for the learning community, the campus infrastructure, and educational design. It's an imperative that seeks to educate leaders capable of addressing the vast interconnected challenges facing our societies over the next decades, including addressing the climate crisis, balancing society's relationship with the natural environment, and being part of crafting new and regenerative models for our global economy. The aspiration of undertaking a systemic reorientation towards developing transformative leaders is the basis for informing our regenerative-inspired campus master plan. A regenerative-inspired aspiration is a focus on issues of human health and well-being. In the constructed environment, materials are selected to avoid toxins typically found in construction. Equipment selections promote heating and comfort systems that deliver better thermal comfort and better air quality. Regenerative-inspired building designs specifically focus on the introduction of daylight and the connections outside, which have been shown to increase positive learning outcomes, productivity, and well-being. In the natural environment, one that is impacted by human settlement, a regenerative-inspired aspiration seeks to restore ecosystem functions. In nature, waste doesn't exist. There are nutrient cycles that can be enhanced and restored. Landscape attributes that clean air and water, sequester carbon, and regulate temperatures are enriched by health and complexity. Conserving, repairing, and enhancing connectivity of natural systems are all opportunities on the campus. And this learning community can steward and ultimately benefit from those. A healthy functioning ecosystem is resilient and provides essential services that benefit human health and well-being. To design regeneratively, to seek abundance, means that we need to understand nature's generosity. She is our model, our mentor, and our measure. She is tuned to place, resilient over time, and in complex interrelationship with place and other species. This is our starting point. The more I know, the more I don't know. I am, and perhaps I've always been, a student of nature. My learning of late has focused on nature's forms, processes, and systems as inspiration for my work as a designer of built environments. And it is this inspiration that I'd like to share with you today. Nature's design solutions are tuned to the operating conditions in which organisms exist, the context of place. These conditions are local, they are cyclical, and they present a state of dynamic non-equilibrium. The only constant is change. My local operating conditions here on Vancouver Island and mirrored at Lakefield include intersections between environments, land and water and sky. Organisms inhabiting these environments overlap and relate. Overlaps and relationships that are at once dynamic, yet defined by limits and boundaries. At these intersections, champion adapters emerge. Having evolved to survive, these charismatic creatures perch atop a cascade of cooperative relationships. They are both tuned to and adapted for their particular station. Nature's structures are multifunctional. Branches of a tree are at once armature for leaf, an array of dispersed mechanisms for harnessing the sun's energy, and habitat for a capable aerial engineer to construct a nest. Nature has evolved deep patterns for adapting to the operating conditions of place. These patterns recur over and over. They are defined by mathematical and physical laws, and they're beautiful. Adaptations include form and process, equally tuned to context. Pattern and color, texture, structure, and form are built for and out of readily available materials. Whether underwater or above the ground, adaptations tune to enable an organism to thrive, and even, in this case, to transform. A flexible, articulated body senses its surroundings with fine hairs, while feeding the transformation yet to come. Living in symbiosis, organisms shape to mutual benefit, beak to flower, fueling this tiny pollinator, all enabled by a hovering flight to inspire drones or propellers or fans to manage flow. And there are those organisms that have mastered the chemistry of life, weaving a perfect pattern from the strongest materials, materials manufactured at ambient temperature from the soup of insect prey. In nature, decay is the digestion of valuable nutrients. It is the cycling of energy, the consumption of detritus that is the foundation for new life, feeding producers, consumers, and cycled again by the multitude of decomposers. Waste is simply a design flaw. The networks of decomposition are mostly unseen, trafficking in the dark. Complex energy exchanges and communication conduit, emerging when conditions are suitable to repair, restore, and expand an ever-evolving wood wide web. Ancient species adapted to the harshest substrates symbiotically coexist. Producers of energy, modular and nested in a network of structure that recycles in situ. These delicate boundary layers manage moisture and air pressure, and they too, in color, texture, and form, are beautiful. Surfaces and coatings that prevent desiccation while enabling mobility across any substrate. Operable appendages suited to extracting information from the environment, extending and contracting, and paste to optimal tuning rather than speed for the sake of fast. Sticky traps embedded in a network of sensors secure energy for the most unlikely carnivores. Adaptive innovations to an environment that washes away vital nitrogen. Deep inspiration for answering the question, how does nature find solutions for a sourcing problem? The tiniest, most ephemeral beings are exquisitely crafted for their task, tuned to the conditions in which they operate, optimized in shape to perform processes that ensure survival in a complex, interconnected world. Every niche appears populated by purpose. Is it competition? Or is it the choreography of a fine production, one that finds a role for each actor? And in the play, there is generosity, there is regeneration, there is renewal. Amidst her cycles of seasons, there is deep inspiration. Imagine designing spring or summer or fall. How might our tuning to nature's mastery transform our own designs? How might we frame our design challenges to leverage nature's time-tested solutions? how might we begin to see, not simply extract, dissect, consume? How might nature's mentorship be far more valuable than anything she produces? And if we truly see, how might we think and design differently? I'd like to share some of our projects with you and the questions that we ask to shape design responses. How does our study of nature inspire regenerative design? How can we study the forms, the processes, and the systems of the natural world and mimic their genius? How can we be nested into the ecosystems we inhabit? How can a building become habitat, harvest its own energy on site, use only water that is of this place, be constructed from materials that are readily available? This is an image of a place of learning for people of all ages, nested in its site, which is a center for horticulture. Students have ready access to a wide range of plant species and their context right on their doorstep. It is here that they begin to see. How does edge, the transition between inside and outside, built and natural, become an ecotone? How does daylight and air, essential for human well-being, get managed at this interface? Accessible, yet imparting comfort. How does nature manage light and air through its skins, its membranes, its structures? What might we learn that could inform low energy solutions, adaptable and flexible, in place, responsive and resilient? This is also a place of learning, a sister school on the West Coast. The shaping of the edge of this classroom building is a shaping of a space of community, of gathering and connection. It's a vibrant space, one that is at the intersection of many edges and conditions, with every piece of the design an opportunity to resolve, inhabit, and restore. What is the architecture of the natural world? How does a canopy function to slow down water, to harness it, and direct it to the benefit of the forest and all of its inhabitants? How does it buffer the wind and harness the sun? How are nature's architectures adapted to a specific space, a specific place, where shape is cheap and material is expensive? Where is material placed so that it's responsive and of greatest benefit to the whole? This building, similar to, or same as the one from the previous slide, considers how the building meets the sky, how it transitions to be in relationship to the abundance of rain and sun, while also sheltering and protecting. How can we learn from history the succession of both built and natural systems in a place? There are adaptations that emerge as evolution, maintaining relevance, yet acknowledging new conditions. The essential ingredients, the pattern of settlement, is still relevant. Materials and forms that are durable and endure. Relationships between inside and outside, knitting a fabric of built and natural that is in relationship. This is another sister school. This learning environment has existed for over 100 years in this place. It has consistently adapted to new modes and paradigms for learning, and yet it's relevant and arguably timeless, past, present, and future intertwined. Inside this building fabric is born of long traditions. Hewers of wood have crafted an artifact from readily available materials. Light is invited in, connection to tree canopy, forest, and lake. This is a building fabricated out of place, decidedly of place. It inspires, and it's beautiful. Buildings can shape ecologies. They create microclimates along edges and at the in-between. These are fertile opportunities to be in relationship, for the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts. Surface area can become habitat. It can grow plants that filter water and clean the air. We think about how design can resolve edges, connections, and invite complexity. These are opportunities and invitations to enrich, to positive benefit. This place of learning supports research and experimentation, and it heals a former parking lot. This is more than a plaque on the wall. It's not about chasing a sustainability metric. It's a way of approaching design that is positive. When we design with a regenerative lens, we are thinking about people. We are thinking about how people can reconnect with the natural world, regardless of their ability. We know that this connection is vital and it's essential to our well-being. It's also an opportunity to remind us that we are nature and that our well-being is tied to that of the planet. This is an image of one of our client groups whose sole mission is to reconnect people of all abilities to the natural world. For them, everyone belongs in nature. This is the place that this organization will call home for the first time in its almost 30-year history. This home is a former golf course, a place that is healing and restoring ecological function as time passes. It aspires to a return to abundance, and our work here will facilitate and accelerate this. When we design with a regenerative lens, we are thinking about place. We are thinking about an intact, healthy ecosystem and how disturbance measures in comparison. We establish performance metrics by studying the place, and our design work targets closing the performance gap in ecological function and restoring to healthy metrics. Ideally, this is both in the natural systems and the built systems that will operate here. When we design with a regenerative lens, we are thinking about the planet. We are designing living buildings, buildings which take less than they use, give back to the health of the ecosystem and the well-being of all. Buildings that are built in disturbed places, that participate in the active healing of that place, produce more energy than they use, consume water that is harvested on site, eliminate toxins and damaging chemicals from all materials, sourced equitably, and afford delight and are educational. And they're beautiful. I'll end with a word of gratitude for nature, her model, her mentorship, her measure, for her constant inspiration. And a shout out to my friends Seth and Sama for their beautiful photography, which I've shared with you today. And to my dog Ojo for her enthusiasm and infinite curiosity for the world she inhabits. May she inspire you to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Now we have lots of time for questions, so please feel free to just add them into the Q&A box, and I'll act as a moderator and I'll ask your questions of Christine. So we've got a number of them. So Christine, one of the first questions that came up, and I think it's a fairly common question, is around the term regenerative, and that the people have heard the term regenerative more and more. So two questions here. Has it replaced sustainable as a useful concept? And also, in what ways is regenerative different than sustainable and maybe some other things?
Yeah, great question, and a common one. For me, and you can do all kinds of searches and reading on this, but from my perspective, sustainable is sustaining something. So there's no it's sort of a status quo. It's not diminishing, it's not necessarily improving. And I distinguish that from regenerative, which for me is about benefit. It's generous, it's generative of positive benefit. And so they are quite distinct. Sustainable suggests trading off sometimes. So we only take what we need, but the regenerative capacity, or sorry, the renewal or the replacement capacity, say, of a forest, for instance, is the biomass encompassed in that forest remains the same. It is sustained. We don't take more than what can regrow itself. Regenerative suggests that we perhaps introduce forests back to a place that they have been gone, and that the biomass benefit is far greater. So I think for me, they're quite different. And in the built environment world, this idea of sustainability has been really focused around performance metrics on kind of energy use. Sometimes it gets tagged with water use. It's starting to tickle into the world of carbon and carbon sequestration. But it's not, it doesn't take that leap into being positive. And one of the other words that we often hear is this net zero water, net zero carbon, net zero energy. That's again an offsetting game. So it's not diminishing what you do, it's suggesting that if you do something good over here, that makes this okay. And regenerative again is stepping outside of that and suggesting that what we should strive for in all instances is benefit and measurable, tangible benefit. I hope that helps.
Yes, well, and building on that, another question which builds on what you've been talking about is, what are some of the biggest hurdles then to regenerative building and architecture?
Yeah, so common language, so understanding what it actually means. You know, it happens that the impediments or the barriers are multi-leveled. At a detail level, the availability of materials that don't do harm to the planet is a profound impediment to regenerative architecture and regenerative design. We simply don't have quality materials that are affordable or fit into the ledger of making buildings that we traditionally see. As we zoom out a bit, that idea of the ledger, what we measure, what we value, there isn't, again, that common language. So all the externalities and the impacts that the traditional ways of making buildings have on the environment are not factored into the equation. They're not accounted for. The cost of operating a building isn't always factored into those first costs of the selection of the kinds of systems that we use to heat or cool ourselves or to ventilate. So those ledgers are not built to encompass regenerative thinking. One of the highest leverage points that I'm having in my work right now is changing people's ledgers, starting to account for the whole cost of what it takes to create a building, to put an artifact into the world. And I think changing mindsets. You know, there is a reality that people don't think climate change is real, don't think that the impact, the anthropogenic impact that we're having on our planetary systems is real. And so to talk about benefit is a hard conversation. And those are the conversations that perhaps are at the highest leverage point to impact change. We have to change mindsets. We have to overcome those barriers to wanting to make change and incentivizing beyond money why we would want to make that change. We want to be good ancestors, and that's, for some people, that's a really hard conversation. Yeah.
Well, and to that point, I mean, this next question is, I think, a little bit between that, what you've talked about there, and the first question, which is the people have moved towards standards and things like LEED. And one of the questions is LEED the certification for regenerative? Are there others? How do you feel about those specific certifications versus just generally the regenerative principles?
Yeah, so certifications are a way that we often use a third party to account for whether or not we've accomplished what we said we were going to. Really good systems measure performance. So when we look at ultimately that third party assessment, really accounting for what was delivered, that performance, the actual performance, is what really matters. Most built environment systems don't ask for that. And in fact, what they rely on is the design criteria, and they rely on reporting by the designers. But there's a gap, because how a building actually gets used and gets operationalized, and how the end users perform in the building has a great influence on that actual performance. So there can be a gap between what was aspired to and what is delivered. And those metrics, LEED is an example of that, really target specific aspects of the built environment. So they're looking at things like energy performance as an outright objective of making good building, or making what I would term as sustainable building. And it's not about, I want to really emphasize, it's not about good or bad or othering. That all of these systems have evolved for a reason. LEED was profoundly influential in raising awareness on the impact that our built environment was having on the planet. LEED tipped us and helped us all understand the things we needed to do in our building fabrics in order to be more sustainable. So to not do worse, to kind of deliver buildings into the world that would actually perform better and arguably do less damage, but sustain sort of a relationship. And then we look at regenerative metrics, measurements, ways that third parties can say, yes, this building is performing. We really only have one metric in the built environment that is truly tagged to what I would term a regenerative performance, an actual performance measurement, and that's the Living Building Challenge. And that is work that we're increasingly doing exclusively in our portfolio. And that's about really setting those key aspirations at the outset to producing more energy than the building uses, cleaning your own water and giving back to the environment, restoring biodiversity on a site, only building on disturbed sites, never on a pristine site, and measuring the performance of an ecosystem and having the building participate in the recovery of a healthy ecosystem as a result of the act of building in that place. And then after a year of operation, measuring whether or not we accomplish those things. So you have to prove it out, and you have to engage. You can imagine how transformative that is for the humans that inhabit that building, because their behavior matters in that calculation and that delivery. So now you're influencing mindsets and you're educating people on their choices. So it's quite different.
And so one of the questions was around the Living Building Challenge and would Lakeville qualify? But if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is, well, you have to start with the building, design what you want, and then assess it later on. So we wouldn't have many buildings like that now because, of course, we haven't started with it yet.
But we have done renovations that have achieved Living Building certification. We've done one in downtown Toronto, and it is PETAL certified, so it doesn't encompass all the characteristics, but it covers what we could in that context. So that's where the place piece comes in. You always want to design in the context and achieve the betterment as best you can. You know, James, this is a really good point, because we talk about this a lot in our work with the school, is this idea that regenerative is actually on a spectrum. It's not
But-
absolute. It's not a plaque on the wall. That we're always moving towards something, but it's that aspiration of betterment that's critical when we're thinking about regenerative inspired design.
Well, and to that point, you've talked about the regenerative design being not an absolute, but a spectrum.
Yep.
So you spend a lot of time now with Lakefield. You spend a lot of time on the campus. You have a good sense of it. Where do you think we find ourselves now, and where do you think we can find ourselves in the future?
Pregnant potential. How's that? Uh, I love Lakefield. I've worked in the independent school space for a couple of decades now, more. And what I love about Lakefield is you have duration in place. So you have 140 years of history of inhabiting this piece of land. And yes, it's you've acquired more over time, but there's presence of place that most of our clients don't have. Maybe one other that's got that kind of duration. So to me, it's like we're at a certain point in the succession of the campus. We're not brand spanking new, which is actually in some respects a little bit harder because we have so many potential variables. What we're actually doing is we're intervening in a well adapted system, and there's so much potential. It's in the forest health. One example in the campus is the hydrology has been impacted by certain decisions that were made on campus that affects the health of the forest. Well, that could be a decision that's made that could be reversed, and more natural hydrology could be part of one of the projects that we undertake. When we think of renovating, we're trying to, even on small little renovation projects, that light and air and that connectivity to the natural world for human wellness is a huge piece of the puzzle. And anyone who knows and has been on the campus and walked through those lower levels knows how vital that is and how it's so absent. So for me, it's such amazing opportunity. And then when we look at the new buildings, that idea of thinking, being aspirational, and really, can we change the ledger a little bit? Can we talk about what we're accounting for in those first costs that has benefit for future generations on the campus? So for me, Lakefield is almost like the perfect canvas for regenerative thinking and regenerative design. It's an extraordinary alignment.
Well, and given your exposure and your work with other schools as well, so you have a broad spectrum of which to draw experiences from. What's your sense of the uniqueness of Lakefield compared to some of those schools? You touched on it briefly, but also some of the opportunities where you can incorporate this idea of regenerative buildings and designs into the actual educational curriculum. I mean, and there's academics are academics sometimes. How do you connect those two dots? How can we do it? How have you seen it in some other schools?
Yeah, our whole environment around us, and I kind of tried to hit that in my slide. Be curious, be inspiring, invite questioning, invite knowledge and the transference of knowledge. One of the worst things we can do as designers is we put knobs on the wall that takes us away from actually understanding how we're interacting and affecting how we feel comfort in an environment. It's all the decisions we make along the way, again, that create a canvas or an armature for learning to happen. I'm always, a couple of things in this space that I'm always trying to do is, and what I mean by space, the independent school space, is you always want to create really beautiful and deeply inspiring spaces that respect the act of learning, and that human endeavor of being curious, that human endeavor of exploring self, exploring new ideas, being vulnerable and interacting with others. The environments that we create can make that more or less successful. It's profoundly important. And so for Lakefield, and I see it's consistent in our work in the independent school space, that's kind of a first objective. And what I see in Lakefield is a pattern of settlement that is has that potential to be wonderfully connected to the natural world, to create this wonderful kind of layering of complexity of interactions, because people are living on campus, so it's a village. And that ability to, in designing all the design moves we make, to enriching the student experience, to allow them to ask curious questions, to be curious, and to engage with their surroundings, and to take ownership of the health and wellness and the evolution of the campus. That's big rambly, but there's so much there, James, that it's such a natural fit again.
Sure, sure. Well, and to that point, are there opportunities when you look at Lakefield vis-a-vis everywhere else with our campus, with and you've referenced it there. I know you've had other conversations on this. Lakefield is, if I remember correctly, fairly unique in the village feel that we have. Are there some other opportunities you see there, in how we renovate and how we think about the buildings, how we think about the property, how we think about Northcott, for example, another part of the campus, which is such a beautiful component of what we do up there?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, yes, and yes. Northcott blows me away, and on so many levels. And I'm just going to kind of focus on that, uh, in response. This whole idea of Northcott as farm, as being this kind of connection to land in service to human wellness and human health, nourishment, nutrition, and that reconnection of students and the school community, with where their food comes from. And I think, we're in just starting to design the dining hall, and how can that dining hall and the whole experience of the dining hall tie into that narrative of where the food comes from, and that idea of connection to a whole system, a whole interconnection of complexity. How do we tell that narrative? How do we connect with it? How do we create an experience that allows for students to engage with that in a really tangible way? And that matters. We can't have things arrive on campus, for instance, that maybe are a box of single-use plastic wrapped little whatevers to the dining hall. Instead, it needs to be carrots covered with dirt that perhaps students that morning picked, or the farmer picked,
Right.
and brings it and delivers. And there needs to be visibility to that. So when we think of the design moves that we might make, how can we connect the student to that? Beyond the maybe picking, how are they also seeing and understanding that connection in a really tangible way? So for me, every move we make, I'm asking about the broader context in which that move is happening, and how the students can participate in that, and gain understanding of how complicated these interrelationships are.
Well, and building on that, the interconnected part of the relationships and where things were placed. One of the questions is how did, as we came up with the master plan, and as you're thinking the interconnection, how is the process? How did it come about the process? Well, where something like the dining hall would go, or how the campus was laid out? How was the process developed?
Yeah, so engagement. And the place we started with is asking as many people as we could, and it was hundreds of folks that we engaged with over many, many days in many different settings. We said what works and what doesn't work. And in doing that act of asking, we don't impose what we see. We actually go deeper, and we understand exactly what's working and what isn't working from the perspective of the people who inhabit the place. And we identified those parts of the campus that were in disrepair or didn't work. And those are disturbances that the act of making building can repair. So that what we can do then in understanding the place, first of all, we don't want to wreck what does work. Those precious things about the campus, that incredible view as you drive on the south entrance of campus and you see the Grove, and you glimpse over your left side and you see down to the water. At certain times of the year, the fall colors are just extraordinary. A new blanket of snow. You don't want to touch any of those things. So you're not going to put a dining hall in the middle of that because nothing's broken. So decisions around where new building might go, and we've identified other locations for future designers and thinkers to hopefully at least pay a nod to. It really comes out of that deep understanding of place and seeing the act of making as an opportunity to animate and repair or heal the campus in a way that is, again, to that positive benefit. So that simple act of deciding on that location is a regenerative act. It has the potential to animate, enliven, and repair a piece of the campus that simply isn't working, and it's actually detrimental in some cases.
Got it. And along those lines, one of the questions was, as we consider new buildings coming on campus over the coming years and decades, do you have some thoughts on how we continually engage the students in the process? I know that was a big part of what you did, working with the leadership team and the staff as far as the Master Campus Plan. But how do you see transitioning in the future that they can continue to be engaged?
Yeah, well, they already are. I mean, all they are active participants in all the conversations we're having when we're renewing or making new on campus. And there's ways that we can manage that in a really in an authentic way that gets reaction and informs people so that they understand. I think 9/10 of the engagement is about having voice heard and having it considered within the context of all the considerations that form design. So the key thing, and I mean, Anne Marie's doing this in spades, is that dialogue and that constant opportunity to have a voice in the considerations of the evolution of the campus. Your students are extraordinary. They get this place and they say it in the plainest way. They don't beat around the bush. They're not sentimental. And tapping into that is just this incredible gift for the decisions and choices you'll make along the way.
Got it. Got it. One question was focused on new structures and designing them to enrich the student experience, and you just referenced it, students taking ownership
Yep.
of their surroundings. So will new structures have transparent or visible input output of energy readings and other ways that they can engage with the actual physical building itself as well as the environment?
Yeah, if I have my way, absolutely. Yeah, and in fact, some of the most successful living buildings are educational environments, and of course, living buildings are global now. There's hundreds of them all over the world, and it's the students who become the the um, the docents to visitors to the site that actually will tell you how their building works.
Right.
And so that hands-on and that really deep understanding of how this system, this living system of a building is supporting and sustaining my wellness as a student is it's transformative. They just own it. And there's wonderful videos if you look on the internet of students sharing and being so proud of their school through various ways, whether it's screens or actually walking people through and showing them how a composting toilet works, or whatever it is. It's quite magical. Yeah.
Well, we've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to throw a bit of a softball out there for those of us with such a connection to community as you have. Uh, what most excites you about the future at Lakefield? When you think about what we have, where we've come from in the future, what's exciting you? What's the adaptations, the changes, just the future? What's exciting about to you that we should be thinking about?
Yeah, the thing that excites me the most is that your willingness to empower the next generations of leaders with this level of knowledge of how critical it is that we look after the planet, and that we own this. We have to own it, and all of the complexity that that represents. For me, it's the outcome. It's what you're ultimately delivering at the end of the day, which is the leaders, and they will be leaders when they emerge from this school, not in the future. You're not setting them up to be leaders. They will be leaders because you're taking a leap and you're believing in something that is already, again, part of your DNA. and you're giving your students the tools in the place that they inhabit, that deep experiential learning that they need to truly understand how their world works. And to me, that's everything. And that is just going to keep growing and growing over time. The things, sometimes we get caught up as designers, and there was a time in my life where we got caught up in getting the object built, and then we were finished. And what time has taught me is that we're such a tiny little insertion in a spectrum, in a continuum of the whole history of the school, that our real work is in service to the students. Our real work is in service to the next generations. And so if we quietly just create these little invitations for the student to be better than the student of last generation, to be that much more impactful in terms of their leadership in the world, I think that is Lakefield's legacy, and it already is.
Well, and to your point, one of the fabulous things about Lakefield, 141 years going so far, for hundreds of years, hopefully in the future, and regeneration and that ownership of students coming out of the place is really what we're all focused on, the leaders of tomorrow. And thank you. I'm going to wrap it up now. I think we're on time. So thank you very much on behalf of everyone, Christine, for sharing the thoughts today on regenerative principles, on your background, on the things that we should aspire to. Let me turn over to Anne-Marie, and if you have any final comments, Anne-Marie.
Christine, you're always so inspirational. So my comment is just a big thank you. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Good night.
Thank you.